Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is here from New York City, Phil Gosselin, who grew up in Newport and who is a 2003 graduate of North Country Union High School. He's here today to talk about his work as a performer and about a production that he is directing in the coming weeks. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott.
So you're back in Newport. Does Newport compare anyhow to New York City?
Well, I love New York City,
Right.
and I love the Northeast Kingdom. I love Vermont. They're very different,
Right.
but they, at least with my travels, balance each other out pretty nicely. It's nice to get away from both.
Is there more nightlife in New York City than there is in downtown Newport?
Yes, that's the short answer. Yeah, there's a lot more.
Right. No, were you a performer in school?
In high school, I was.
Right.
At the time, there was not a lot of activity in school at North Country.
Right.
I think there was, in my senior year, there was a budding club
Right.
at the time, and now I know that there's a lot more going on there. So most of my performing took place outside of the school.
Right. In more recent years, you actually inherited a new aunt who's a rather colorful character in the local performance world.
I'll say she's quite colorful. Yeah, about 10 years ago,
Right.
my Uncle Doug Flint married Lynn,
Right.
and she's been part of the family ever since.
So that must have been great for you because you both have this love of performing.
Right.
Right.
It has been great, and I've been able to kind of insert myself back into her company in more recent years. A couple years ago, I was in an adaptation of Dracula back in the fall of 2010, and then last year I did the 39 Steps.
Right.
So it's been great.
Right. So you try to balance your time between New York City and the Northeast Kingdom?
Yeah, I do. It's nice to be home. It's nice to come here and be able to be with my family.
Right.
And I look forward to making that opportunity happen whenever I can.
You know, I don't know if you've been back over to North Country, but I think North Country is doing a whole lot more in the performance world since you went to North Country.
That's great. I know that when I left, their dance program
Right.
was, I think, probably at its height.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly what how the dance company works now, but I know that they have a much more active and prevalent theater group.
You know, when you hear the name Gosselin up here, you think of another local director and performer is Chase Gosselin, who's a real up-and-coming actor and performer and director.
Right.
Is he related to you?
We are related. We are cousins.
Right.
I think, slightly different generations
Right.
of them, but we are related.
All right, we talked about this before the show. Up in the border region, when it comes to French names, everybody seems to say them a little differently.
Sure.
I've heard your name, Gosselin, and then Gosla, or something like that.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce your name?
I say Gosselin,
Right.
with the double S like a Z,
Right.
as it were. But I know that my dad would probably, and this is pretty poor interpretation of it, would probably pronounce it Gosselin.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. So how did you first become interested in the performing?
Well, I would say when I was a very young child, I had a propensity for showmanship, just as a kind of everyday life kind of thing, as a lot of children do, I would say. And when I was in the 6th grade, my former kindergarten teacher asked me if I might be interested, or asked my mom, Mrs. Ames. She asked me if I might be interested in auditioning for Derby Stock's production of Oliver. And I guess my mom thought that was a good idea. I went and I auditioned, and I got a part in the show, and that was my first production. I did Oliver, and then the next year I auditioned for Gypsy, which was a QNEK production up at the Haskell. And from that point on, every summer, I was usually performing at the Haskell until I left for college.
You didn't have, were you in The Wizard of Oz with the Derby Stock Company?
No, I was not in The Wizard of Oz.
Right. No, my daughter was in that, and that's where I got to see, of course, she was just little, and I think she was a munchkin or something.
Sure, yeah.
And but that's where I got a taste of all the work that goes on behind the scenes, because you don't just get together and say, hey, let's do this show. There's so much more to it.
There's a lot to it. There's a lot that you don't see, and this is one of, say, my favorite reason, or favorite part of theater, the collaborative nature of any performance art, actually. You start with a script, a writer, an author, composer contributes. They take, it can take years and years of development to have a final copy of something. And in this case, we'll take the Fantastics. Tom Jones and Harvey Schmidt have created a beautiful score and script. And a company, a production company, a theater group wants to put it on. They buy the rights to do it. They get the materials. They have a director comes up with some kind of vision. They put together a group of auditions. They select a cast, and they'll begin rehearsals. So you have a director and then a group of actors that are both coming to the table, bringing their best work, hopefully.
Right.
So you have that portion, and then meanwhile, the director is meeting with any kind of designers that he has the opportunity to work with in terms of scenic design, lighting design, costume design, and as well as musicians. In this case, we have a beautiful score, piano and harp, concert harp. So there's tons of collaboration happening.
Now, this is going to sound like a foolish question, but I'm not in your world, so a producer versus a director, is there a difference?
There's a difference. A director is a creative role. It's a creative role. They work with the actors, and they're responsible for everything creative that takes place, with the lighting, the scene, everything like that. The producer is the details of the production. They make sure they have a theater to rent. They make sure, in some cases, actors are paid, musicians are paid. They make sure there's someone to clean the theater. They make sure they work with, if they're not doing it themselves, they're working with a separate group to market the show and all the publicity. So everything, all of the business, and then sometimes finding investors, when you're at, high levels of regional theater or Broadway, the producer takes care of that stuff.
Right.
So
you mentioned pay. Now, is this your job that you survive on, or do you have to do something else to pay your bills?
Well, when I'm not working as an actor, I do have to work other places to pay the bills. Fortunately, I've been able to work regionally and been able to make that a good paying portion of my life. But most of my work has taken place outside of New York City. So when I'm in New York City, I usually find day jobs to supplement my income.
So when you are playing a character, do you sometimes forget that you're not that? Because I've talked to other people who said that when you're on stage, you really become that character. Do you get that involved where you actually feel like that character when you're up there? And if so, when you step off the stage, do you occasionally have to remind yourself who you are?
Well, I'd say that I've had moments where I have gotten lost in the world of a character, and certainly that is welcomed on stage.
Right.
You do a lot of prep before there's any performances. Mm-hmm. You try and put yourself in the point of view of whatever character you're playing. You try to live essentially under whatever circumstances
right.
that character has and possesses, and whatever their life has become.
Right.
But for me, I am the kind of stage actor that is pretty much always aware of the audience and being on stage. And I think that is necessary, especially on stage,
right.
When there's not hundreds of crew that are taking care of lens angles, or in film it's a completely different world. But on stage, the final collaboration that I was talking about is the role of the audience,
right.
And that's why we do it. So.
Now, do you think you perform better though when there's a big audience versus a smaller one? Because I know I do a lot of public speaking, not performing, right. But I do a lot, and if I feel that, because, well, when I was in high school, I used to actually skip school so I wouldn't have to do public speaking.
Okay.
I hated it.
Yeah.
So my take on it now is, if I'm going to stand up there in front of somebody, I'd rather have, instead of having half a dozen, I'd like, an overflowing crowd.
Sure.
Because if I'm going to stand up there and put myself through it, do you feel any different with the number of people?
Well, there are differences in size. The way I feel, I mean, if you have 3 people in the audience as opposed to 200,
right.
They're just the pure mass
right.
of them is welcoming.
Right.
But it's more about an energy exchange. If you have a large audience that really couldn't care less about what you're doing, wasn't entertained, having a good time, what you didn't feel was present with you in the room, that's not something. I would much rather have a dozen people that were really there with you and connected and really paying attention to everything that you were doing.
In the theater world, is there a room, when you're trying to remember your script,
mm-hmm.
is there any wiggle room to where you make up your own words if necessary, or do you go word for word?
Well, I really enjoy using improvisation as a tool
right.
in rehearsal. When you are trying to work on a script, there's a lot that goes into playing with a scene partner that can be crucial
right.
to bringing the words to life.
Right.
And in those cases, I really love improvising with a scene partner.
Right.
But the writer has contributed these words, and they've
right.
chosen these
right.
words. Like I said, it can take years to
right.
develop a script. So those words are there for a reason.
Right.
They've been chosen.
Right.
And I respect
right.
authors and writers and composers.
Right.
So my job and our job as actors is to bring those words to life. So I think a lot of times it's a disservice to not do your job and to make up something that wasn't
right.
pre-discussed or worked
right.
on with a director.
But must be the ability to improvise probably sometimes helps you take your foot out of your mouth.
Sure.
Like when there must be moments when you start to say something and you realize that, I just don't remember, and
yeah.
You need a bit of time to get yourself refocused.
It's true. That's one of the beautiful things about live theater, is that it's live and that it's never the same.
Right.
Or hopefully it shouldn't be ever the same. So yeah, you have those rare moments where you need to be light on your feet. And if if you've done your job and you're living under those circumstances, if you're really a part of the scene, it shouldn't be a difficult thing to keep moving with the through line of action that you have worked on with your scene partner. So,
right. Have you performed with any notable people that maybe some of the viewers would recognize?
I don't think I have. No.
Okay.
No.
And there's a lot
Hard to
of
disappoint.
Oh no, that's. I do know that there's a number of people who graduated from North Country over the years who have taken to New York City to find fame, or at least take part in the theater and different productions. Do you ever run into any of them? Like
I have friends that I went to high school with that were part of my group of friends in high school that live in the city.
Right.
In more recent years, I see them less and less.
Right.
But it's exciting and comforting to know that they're there in the city, pursuing whatever new dream or consistent dream they've had throughout the years. So.
Now, needless to say, there's a huge difference between Newport, Vermont, where you grew up, and New York City. I once had a person tell me about living in New York City. The saying isn't really true. I would rather not. New York City, or any big city, is a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. And what she said was, no, I wouldn't want to visit New York City, but it's a great place to live, because basically what she was telling me was, once you know New York City or any big city, it becomes much more comfortable than, say, just to visit. Like, do you feel totally comfortable in that world now?
I'm pretty comfortable walking around, going day to day, going to work, recreational, fun. There are a lot of things that don't faze me in New York anymore. We're all living right on top of each other, and there's tons of activity. So you get desensitized to the excitement and the frenzy that is seen kind of on the surface level by visitors.
Right. Well, I bet you, though, you probably do like my sons do, who graduated a year after you, because they've lived in more urban settings as well over the years.
Right.
One thing I really have a hard time getting used to is them always locking the doors on me. Because I'm not used to locking the house doors. I'm not used to locking my vehicles. And so when they come home, it's like bedtime, lock all the doors. You take anything of value out of your vehicle, and I say, hey, wait.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that is mandatory in any urban setting.
Right.
And it's just one of those things when you have so many people and you live so closely together in who knows what kind of apartment style setup. It's hard to be as aware as you can be in a rural setting, or like we are here in Newport in the Northeast Kingdom.
You know, a lot of young people, when they graduate from high school, the first thing they want to do is get away from the Northeast Kingdom, because it's boring, as they will say. Do you think you've learned to maybe even appreciate the Northeast Kingdom more in different ways than you did?
Sure. I without a doubt have. Every year it seems to grow. I grow more fond of it. And I was fond of it. I couldn't say that I hated it or was bored when I was here, but living other places, definitely you come to appreciate home differently. You appreciate the landscape, which is unmatched by anywhere that I've ever seen, and you appreciate the community that's here. So this will always be my home, and this a place that I cherish.
Right. Okay, let's move on to you're here, you're here to work. You're directing a show at the Haskell?
I am.
And what's the show called?
The Fantastics.
Right.
It is the longest running musical in the world and the most produced internationally. It is this most recent May, it had a birthday. It's 52 years old.
And what is the date of the showing at the Haskell?
Well, we have 5 performances total. We open next Friday.
All right, next Friday,
August 10th.
Right.
And we have 2 shows the following day, a matinee on the 11th, and then an evening performance on the 11th. That's Saturday. And then the following weekend, evening performances both Friday the 17th and Friday the 18th.
And what can people who attend, what can they expect from this show?
Well, this show has something for everybody. It runs the gamut, from comedy to suspense. It's a beautiful show. The composers and the author have just been this year inducted into the American Songwriters Hall of Fame. So you will probably recognize some of the tunes that have become standards over the years. Try to Remember is a famous one, and They Were You. That's a famous, it's a duet in the show, but performed by countless artists. And I think that this show, as a lot of shows that they've kind of been the cornerstone for modern musical comedy, musical theater, and this show, any of Leonard Bernstein's shows, especially West Side Story, it kind of does what Shakespeare does to the modern play or modern theater as we know it.
So what is your role?
I'm the director.
Right.
I'm directing the show.
Right. And so how does it feel to be back on your home turf directing a show? Is there any difference than, say, directing one or taking part in a show in New York City where you're kind of an anonymous person?
Yes, a huge difference. For one, there are no theaters like the Haskell Opera House in New York City. It's the anomaly of straddling the border it's a one of a kind. And its age and the way it's been kept up is beautiful. And there's a space like that, it's 1 in a million. So that in itself is a wonderful aspect to this. And also, this being the community that I grew up in, it has a special place for me, the community, the people I know and have worked with, when I was younger, and also a kind of a new generation of young performers.
Right.
It's all been great.
Yeah. So are there going to be any other local people involved in this production?
Everyone in the show is local.
Okay.
Chris Sellers plays the narrator and the lead character El Gallo, and he's fantastic. He's a phenomenal talent. And Emma Moorman and Alan Cubitt are playing the leads, the boy and the girl. It's essentially their love story, though the play, the musical, has a couple separate love stories. Essentially at its root is a love story. And then their fathers are played by Steve Laurie and Alan Franklin. And rounding out the cast is Molly Desormeaux, who is just over the border in Quebec, who has been a kind of a staple of theater in the Northeast Kingdom for a long time, and John Young and Mark Rummery.
Okay. Now, how long have you been working with them on this production to make this all happen?
We've been in rehearsal for about 5.5 weeks, I would say. Total of 7 weeks of rehearsal. So we're getting pretty close.
So some of these people you're working with, were you working with them even when you were a youngster? Because I know Mark Rummery has been into this for quite some time.
Sure, yeah. He's someone, I don't remember specifically, but I remember him just as a kind of a staple around. I also worked with him and John Young recently when I did Dracula. Back in 2010 up at the Haskell in the fall.
So you only have about 5 more minutes left.
Okay.
What more would you like to tell the viewers, either about yourself, about the show, or maybe even about the Haskell?
Well, as I was saying before, the Haskell is a treasure, and I personally appreciate how its existence and that it's been kept in the state it's been. And I encourage people who have never been to the Haskell to see a show, to come out. I think across the board in our culture right now, live performance is something that is becoming a lost treasure. I think in a way it is dying. And for whatever reasons, I'm not sure. I think we live in an age where we can have anything on screen instantly.
Right.
And we, as human beings, go to that for our entertainment because it is so easy. But there is nothing at all like live performance, whether it be theater or dance or listening to live music. I think most people would agree with me on that. So when things happen, especially in the summer, there's a lot going on. I encourage people to come out and try it if they don't think they like it, or if they have seen something once and weren't sure about it. Come on out. It's a great. This show especially has something for everyone. Right. The music, it will seem familiar even if you've never heard it before.
Right. Now, how long does it take to typically prepare for a show such as this for you, for the performers? Because, as I said, I've ventured into that world just lightly with my daughter, and I was amazed just the amount of stuff that has to be done behind the scenes. But how long does it? Because a lot of times these shows come off flawlessly.
Well, hopefully ours will. That's the plan. No, every show has its own challenges, and when you have a staff and a crew and actors that are working as their job full time on the show, you can put up a show in 2.5 weeks.
Oh, really? That quick?
But in this specific sense, where the actors have full-time careers, they have jobs, or are students, they have less time in their daily allotment of hours to work on the show. So it can take a little longer. Right. Everyone is volunteering their time, which in its own way makes it special. Right. Because no one is just doing it for the money. They're doing it because they are having fun and they enjoyed the time spent. So I'd say typically 8 weeks, 7 to 8 weeks is the good mark.
Okay. So again, what is the date of the showing?
The dates of the Fantastics are the 10th, the 11th of August, and the 17th and 18th.
Right, and I assume that it'll be promoted in the newspapers and where people will be. All right, once you wrap up this show, what's next for you?
Well, I'll be going back to New York City and currently don't have anything on my docket, on my schedule. So kind of back to square one. But we'll see. I've enjoyed directing quite a lot, and I would like to set my sights more into arts administration. And I will always love performance, and that will be something that I go back to as long as I can. Right. But I'm interested more in a different perspective on this collaborative art form. So we'll see what I can find.
Okay, thank you for coming on the show, because it's always nice to see local, homegrown people making good. Because you know what is, I honestly believe whether you move away or whether you stay here, there's a lot of opportunities. You make the best of life, and you know what? A lot of people like to talk about the young generation is not amounting to anything. Well, I know you grew up with my sons, and then to a lesser degree my daughter. But I think there's so many of your generations that's doing so many great things, and I think too often we old people like to look down and say, "Geez, they're never going to amount to anything. Here's the secret is, you will do the same thing someday. You'll have to catch yourself. And I
Okay.
bet you've already started talking about, oh, geez, this younger generation. It's been going on probably since Adam and Eve. And we all look back, and every once in a while we need to remind ourselves, no. Most of the generation is really good. And I really think that's true of your generation. I think you're so much more intelligent than the generations that came before you in so many ways.
Well, thanks, Scott.
So, okay, thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.